This room's a little intimidating. Like, it's the first time I've taught in this big room, and I might stand up. And I use my hands a lot. I'm sorry. So I'm glad y'all are all here. So Condo 101. I'm a pretty informal teacher, so I've got kind of my checklist of things I want to go through. But I think I'd like to start with you guys. Like, what did you come in here and go, I need to understand this? Like, or is it just you don't know what you don't know? But does anybody have any questions or anything that you know you wanted to get out of the class today? Yeah.
Just an understanding of how condo sales work.
Okay.
In case we come across that client.
Okay. Okay. So if in the terms of if you're representing a buyer, okay. All right. Good deal. Well, we'll start there. And that's where a lot of this class is going to be geared towards anyway. So where do I want to start? All right. So when you're working with a buyer, let's start from the financing standpoint. When you're working with a buyer, I'm listening to when you're working with a buyer and they're going to be financing, you want to use a local lender that specializes in condos. That's your first thing. You know, the big box, Quicken, Bank of America, it's just not gonna end well, more than likely. So I would find 2 to 3, 4 local lenders that you want to partner with or have in your repertoire to give to buyers. And I think we have a lender coming at team meeting, so you know, as far as specific lending questions, you can ask them. I can kind of touch on some of it. Who's coming? Insurance? I don't know if they do condos. Well, let's just leave it at that for right now. We might circle back around to financing, but a local lender, you know, Supreme Lending does a good job. Movement Mortgage usually does a good job. I use Joey Parker at Center State Bank. Assurance. Yeah.
They do. They're a Louisiana company.
Okay. Okay. So they'll be good to really talk about that. Who else is on my list? There's Sherry Weaver. She's at the First, and she does a lot of condos. Condo lending got a little bit more difficult this year. Okay. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac changed their guidelines, and the way the guidelines read, it pretty much tells you they want out of resort markets. Like, I think that's where it's going. So Brad Lynch over at Movement Mortgage and both Joey Parker at Center State. There may be other lenders that offer this, but they're the two that I know of, offer portfolio loans. Okay. And what the portfolio loan does on a condo, they don't have to get a condo questionnaire. Like, it's an in-house loan, so they don't have to meet the Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac guidelines. So they're and Joey's product, you can put as little as 10% down. So I've had a ton of people use that this year in the last 6 months. So just know that partnering with a lender that really specializes in condos is going to make it a much more easier process for your buyer. Okay.
Heather, when you say specialized financing, is that for investment or is that for second or primary?
Any of it. Any of it.
Okay.
Any of it. So let me go back. So when a buyer says, hey, I want to buy a condo, and they go to this bank and they say, hey, I want to buy a condo, but pre-approve me. Great, they're looking at the bar and they're saying you're good to go. Well, in a condo, the lender's not only looking at the individual borrower, they're looking at the condo complex themselves. And to meet Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac guidelines, they have to get what we call a review form filled out. There's 2 types of forms. There's a limited review or a full review. And I'm not going to go deep in all that, but that's some of the kind of the backside. So the lender's looking to decide if they feel like that condo complex is financially sound and meets, you know, that fits in that box that Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac wants. And with the portfolio product, they don't do the review form. So they're handling a lot less high. And sometimes that can be a tough conversation with the buyers because they go, well, this lender said they give me this great rate, but you got to stand firm. And, you know, I just tell people, look, I've been doing this long enough. I'm just telling you it's not going to end well. And I'll say, just go talk to Joey Parker. Go talk. And if it's a lender that does condos, they can help them see why using Quicken or Lending Tree or whoever these companies are is going to be a bad idea. So. All right, so, so let's talk about, okay, so the buyer wants to buy a condo. What do they need to know about buying a condo, owning a condo? What are their expenses, so forth. So, first is, so let me start this. There's 4 general ongoing expenses that a owner would have in a condo. You have the monthly HOA fee, you have property taxes, insurance for their unit, and then electric, internet, you know, that kind of thing, that does not include HOA. So generally speaking, what's included with an HOA fee, and if y'all can look online, you're probably familiar with this, is your, you know, maintenance of the common areas, the pools, and things like that. You've got reserve funds. You want to make sure that they're putting money into a reserve account. That's one of the things the lender's looking for, by the way, for Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac. The insurance for the building. There's 2 ways that can do that. Property taxes for the common areas, and then utilities, trash, water, sewer, basic cable are almost always included with the HOA. Some do not include the cable, like Beach Club doesn't. And then some include the internet with the HOA. Okay. So you want to educate them, yeah. Good question, huh?
So the insurance and taxes are not combined in escrowing the loan compared to a residential loan?
So, so property taxes are gonna be escrowed. But, so there's 2 property taxes that you're gonna pay, a person's gonna pay on a condo. They're gonna pay property taxes for the common areas through the HOA fee, that's that avenue. And then they're gonna pay their individual, so the county's like, hey, we want our piece of it. So basically, when you own a condo, they're paying property taxes on their air. I mean, if you think about it. So they're paying their individual property taxes, and then they're paying property taxes for the common areas through the HOA fee. So the HOA, let's see, the HOA, so the dues, and I'm trying to think, I lost my train of thought. Assessments, yeah, so, you know, if somebody owns a condo, there's likely gonna have an assessment at some point. There's 2 types of assessments. There's an insurance assessment or a special assessment. The insurance assessment, so remember I mentioned that the HOA fee, it's portion of that goes towards the master policy. Not always. There's 2 ways that an HOA can collect the funds for that. They can do it by putting in a line item on their budget, and each month a portion of the income that the HOA takes in goes into an account to pay that annual premium when it comes due. Or they can do once a year insurance assessment. We are going to see a lot more insurance assessments, or we already are seeing them. So what happens, we have a major event, insurance rates start spiking, and so HOAs, rather than potentially raising their HOA fees, they just do an insurance assessment. And that'll, we'll probably see them for probably the next 5, 6, 7 years, until we get, you know, if we go that length of time without a hurricane, then we'll probably see them come back down. And like we got to the point where we weren't seeing a lot of insurance assessments, but now I'm starting to see more and more.
Yeah, I think after that collapse in Miami, the condos, they're starting doing more of the structural inspections.
Oh, yeah,
Because of
probably.
that big thing that happened.
Yeah. You know what's funny though? I haven't had anybody really, like I thought, oh gosh, condo sales are gonna, but they really, people haven't said, have y'all run into people saying anything about that? No.
No, but I
There is
think
one building that has a crack in it right now. There's litigation, so. Look at it, just have somebody sign it too. Do you? On me, yeah. Okay, so assessment, so insurance, so insurance assessment, the other type of assessment is a special assessment, and that's when the association says, okay, we want to replace the roof or the railings or paint the building, or we just had a hurricane, or we have an insurance deductible, or we have items that were not covered. That would come in the form of a special assessment. Now, how the generally speaking, how the assessments are determined is usually based on the square footage, and that's a lot of times in the condo docs, but we'll talk about the condo docs in a minute. But so generally a 1-bedroom will pay less than a 2, a 2 will pay less than a 3 in that given building when there's an assessment, because they just base it on your square footage. Does that make sense? Assessments could be a few $100s, they could be several $1000s. I mean, there were some buildings down here that had $30,000 and $40,000 assessments after Sally. There were many of them that were some. So, and there's some buildings that have done some assessments for, as a result of Sally, and there still have more probably coming. So, to be honest, I don't want to sell real estate after a hurricane again. This was my first hurricane where I was selling real estate, so I was not selling in 2004 when I had it, but it's been challenging. All right, any questions on assessments? In the contract, go ahead.
Another question I would have on that, if you're the buyer and you're about to, there's an existing assessment on the way,
I'm listening.
are you liable for that? Like, or is the owner that knows they already had one?
That's what
But
I
they
was
agreed
about
on
to
it.
get into,
Okay.
yeah. So I'm gonna pull up the contract really quickly, so we can point to that section of the contract. Get it right. First time.
Go to the before page and just go to the top.
Oh, darn. Maybe I'll see if Jamie do it, and that way I keep talking. So in the contract, and I don't remember what section it is, hey, Tanya, will you, see if Jen can pull up a contract on this here? There's a section on assessments. So Alabama's non-disclosure state. So in theory, the seller doesn't really have to disclose it to you. So there's a couple things you want to do say for that. First of all, just ask the agent up front. Not all agents are gonna know or take the time to try to really find out what's going on. So there's a section in the contract regarding assessments. I by default always mark seller, because we don't know. Now, when we get to that section, can you pull up a purchase agreement? I was trying to get in my document, and I don't have my password. I know. So part of the HOA due diligence that's in the contract, and we're going to talk about that for a second too, is for hopefully the property owner to, or the buyer to uncover that any discussion of assessments or the known of an assessment coming, okay? And so right now, what we've done in follow-up from Sally is I've done a number of escrow agreements, so we do find out there is an assessment. So the seller's mentality is, if it's something like Sally or work that's already been done, really they should pay for that. But let's say the building is going to replace all the windows and doors. That's future enjoyment. So it's hard a lot of times, depending on the motivation of the seller, it's hard a lot of times to get a seller to pay that, but certainly ask. But that's one of the things that this section here. All right, so this talks about owner's assessments. And so this one is always seller. And let's see where, and that's even the default. If there's any that are already due or out there, they have to pay it by closing. This D is negotiable. Like I said, I always mark seller. More times than not, it gets countered to buyer, but why not? I had one the other day that they didn't counter it, and I was like, well, great, if the assessment shows up in the next 2 weeks, it's gonna be the seller's responsibility, but they were pretty confident it wasn't. So that's the part on assessments. Now then, what the HOA due diligence, which is a super important part of contract and a buyer's responsibility. So are y'all all familiar with this section of the contract? You're not? Okay, so we're going to talk about that. So if somebody's buying a condo, 32 is very, very important. So what it says is that the seller within 5 business days, unless you change it to a different day, has to provide all of these items. So we're gonna talk about that a little bit. And then the buyer shall have 5 business days from receipt of these closures to decide if they're satisfied with the HOA. So that's the period of time where you want to try to uncover other assessments coming, or being discussed that the buyer needs to be aware of, right? So the first is the recorded declaration of condominium and amendments thereto, bylaws, covenants, restrictions, rules, regulations. Some of that you can find in public records, but that's going to tell them, you know, how the associations run, rules, pet policies. That's one of the things that you need to be aware of when you've got a buyer that if they have a dog that's very important to them. That's just going to give you the general how the condo was set up. Does that make sense? All right, and then minutes from the last 2 homeowner meeting minutes and the last 2 board of directors meeting minutes. That's where they're going to see are their big projects being discussed. Is there something we need to be aware of? And so that those 2 documents are very important. And I'm going to tell you, sometimes you have to push agents. They will send you stuff. That's a bad word, but it can be challenging sometimes to get this information. A lot of the HOA management companies now are going to where they charge you for it. So just know if you list the property for sale, you either need to have that discussion with the seller up front, like, hey, we're going to be required to provide this information, and Coastline's going to charge you $150. Like, put it back on the seller, otherwise you're going to be paying for it. And I'm seeing that more and more that they're charging for it, which is kind of ridiculous. Whatever. All right, a statement set forth of the amount of the monthly expenses and any unpaid expenses. So basically, that's a statement from an HOA showing what their monthly HOA fee is. Are they past due on any balances, assessments, and or are there any assessments on their account? And that's usually just, I mean, it looks like an invoice statement a lot of times is what I get. But that's just the buyer's opportunity to verify that the HOA fee that's advertised in MLS is correct. Okay. Statement of any fees. Okay, so that's actually the HOA. And then the C is if there's any assessments on their account that they haven't paid. All right, balance sheet and a budget. So E and F. So what you want is a budget, a recent budget. So right now it's 2021, but there may be some that you think you're closing on right now. You can get the 22 budget so that the buyer can see, okay, what are they budgeting for? Like what's included in that monthly HOA fee? That's going to show them what's included in that. And then the balance sheet or the balance sheet P&L, that shows the amount of money they have in reserves, just what their monthly ongoing expenses are. And probably anyway, any questions on those so far? Yeah.
I had a problem where there used to be a management on a condo, and when I called to get the 2 last meetings, now it's being managed, they said, by the owners. So how do I get a contact information if you don't know who's on the board or who's on
Are
HOA?
you seller or are you represent buyer? Are you representing the
I think
seller?
it's
You represent both parties?
yes.
Okay, so you need to get with the seller and they need to help her dog it, because sometimes these HOAs, you know, they don't, it's like it's private information, right? And there's sometimes funny about just handing it out. And if they're not giving me what I need, I get the seller involved because they're a homeowner, they pay the dues, they have every right to that information. And so if they can't get it from the board, then some of that board needs to go. That previous management company has it, and they're probably mad at holding it hostage. But they paid for a service to that company, and they need to. So somebody just needs to get it.
So there's no way to get it from. So they're not required to put it in a public. No.
sometimes the HOAs have a website where you can get like condo documents and, I mean, those kind of things are recorded, but they're private financial information. Now, some HOAs have a portal. If the seller has a portal, there's usually a lot of information there, but again, that's usually through a third-party management company. And if they've cut ties with that company, that portal may or may not still be active.
Heather,
What
why,
building is
why
that?
is there not an L in there with, say, the rental income verification or something like that? Is that part of it?
That's not, that's a whole.
That has nothing to do with the
This
condominium.
is HOA specific.
Okay.
So if there's something in regards to, rental verification that you want, I'd say write it in the contract.
The renters look at rental at all.
Depends on the type of loan. If they're doing an investment loan, if the borrower is the buyer, is using the rental income to help qualify for it, then yes, they will look at it, or they'll have the appraiser do a rent schedule. Just to kind of show what it would do. All right, balance sheet, budget balance sheet. A statement of unsatisfied judgments against the property. That can literally be an email from somebody with the HOA, just saying we have no liens, no judgments, no suits. A statement describing any insurance coverage, that would be their declaration page for the master insurance policy. Leasehold, I don't know of any, do you know of any here down here, Nancy, that have leaseholds?
No.
Yeah, I don't either. That's in our contract, but most HOAs go, I don't even know what that is, but, there's no leaseholds down here that I'm aware of. And then, a statement of restrictions in the declaration affecting the amount the person can receive upon sale, condemnation, casualty. So this basically, and this is, Jay is a little bit harder to get, it's basically saying if something happened and the building burned to the ground, me being the owner of unit 305, what would I have rights to? That's what that statement's about. And that's hard to get. I don't know that, but, and then contact information for the associations. All right, so here's the big piece of this. I do not read condo documents, financials. I do not tell my clients, like, I think they're good, I think they're bad. I don't want that liability. So I say, here it is, and they might ask me about the reserves, and I'll say, well, compared to other buildings that size, it seems to be a little better, a little worse than what I've seen, but, you might want to talk to your accountant. I direct them to the HOA for any questions they have, and I give them actually a list of suggested questions, just because if they've never owned a condo, they don't know what to ask. So I kind of have a list of like the pet policy, because a lot of people have dogs and they want to bring their dogs. Like, are pets allowed? I would say cats are pretty much not allowed in condos down here because of the beach mouse, but if it's on the beach. Ask them if there's restrictions around dogs, if there's any assessments coming up, discussion of assessments. What's some other things I have on that?
What does the HOA provide for?
Yeah. So I'll even, give them a list of, hey, these are some things you might want to ask, but I'm sure you'll have your own. So I try to get out of the middle of that because I just don't want that liability. So, any questions on that? All right. All right, let's talk about insurance. Okay, so that the other part of the purchase agreement is you can put an insurance contingency in here. Condos, the insurance is going to run right now, of course, depending on the size of the unit and the location. And I'm just going to kind of assume everything's on the beach, right? That's where most of them are. Probably going to run anywhere from about 1,000 to maybe 2,000 if it's a bigger condo. But you can, so I would educate your buyer upfront, like, hey, the master policy is going to have the insurance for the building, but you're going to need your own insurance, right? It's called an HO6 insurance policy, and that's going to cover contents and liability. It picks up where the master policy stops. All right, so probably should have an insurance person here. That's when you get an insurance person here talking about this. So I'm going to give you a little bit, but I would say I am not an insurance professional. verify anything I tell you, but this is just some good general knowledge to have. All right, so the H06 will pick up where the master policy stops. The master can have two types of policies. They can have an all-in or a not all-in. In Alabama, there was a Condo Act in 91. 91, do you remember?
91 or 2.
I know, I can never remember if it's 91 or 92. I think it was 91. The Condo Act in Alabama in 1991 said that a condo association is required by law to carry an all-in policy. Okay, so what does that mean? All-in policy means that the condo association insurance has to put the condo back the way it was when it was built. So flooring, cabinets, countertops, things that are inside your unit that could be considered personal property, but it was there when it was built. If it was built before that Condo Act, they're not required by law. I will say a lot of the older complexes, I do see them carry all-in policies, but the buyer needs to know that, hey, depending on if it's all in or not, they may need some additional coverage on their HO6, okay? If it is not an all-in policy by the HOA, that price I quoted you of like $1,000, maybe $2,000, it's probably gonna be a little bit higher than that. There's some riders that I like to educate my buyers on that you can get on that HO6 policy. So let me go back. I tell my buyers that it's good to use a local insurance company because they know these condos. A lot of times they know what the insurance coverages are, and hopefully there's not a gap in coverage there. And a lot of the local insurance companies will work with insurance. They're brokers, so they work with insurance companies that will write the limit. So that's another important piece of it. But some of the riders that they can get on their HO6 policy, loss of use, and I think all the local insurance companies will just automatically put that on there. And so loss of use steps in if, like, hey, we have a major storm and somebody had to cancel 2 months of bookings, the loss of use will reimburse them for those canceled bookings. Another rider is an assessment rider. And the insurance companies, a lot of times, I'm seeing them add it more lately, but for a lot of years, they didn't even tell people about them. And that, I don't know the ins and outs of it. I think it has to be a named storm, but it will cover you for the assessment. So for example, I had a client that had a unit Phoenix 5. She had a $15,000 assessment rider. It paid her Sally assessment for her. So she didn't have anything out of pocket. So make sure they ask about the assessment rider. And look, these riders are gonna bump that rate up, but anyway. Loss of use, an upgrade rider. So what that is, so let's say, remember I said that the condos insurance will put it back the way when it was built. Well, if it had formica countertops, carpet throughout, builder grade cabinets, that's what it pays for. Well, if somebody's come in and gutted it and put quartz counters, wood floors, whatever, they may want some coverage for those upgrades. But I guess that's it. That's the writers.
Do you recommend liability coverage?
Well, that's part of the HO6.
That's
So
part of what?
that's part of the HO6. So the HO6 policy is, HO6 is liability and premiums.
Okay, so they wouldn't need to add.
No, but they might want to adjust the amount of liability. But they need to decide that.
So the HO6 only if it's an investment or if it's primary or secondary?
Any of the all
Any
the
and all?
above.
Okay.
That's your insurance. So
Yeah.
people go, oh, that's like renters insurance. And it's, yes, it's similar, but it's different.
But the loss of use would be if it's around. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know why we would need that yet.
So if someone slips inside the condo and they break their neck,
And they want to sue the
and you want
owner,
to sue the owner, you want to have a,
you want to have coverage. And sometimes people have umbrella policies and they don't necessarily need the liability portion of the HO6, but I would say advise them to get with their insurance professional just to make sure. Because I mean, if you've got like a lot of times like attorneys, doctors, people that are working these fields where they carry lots of liability insurance, they'll sometimes go, well, I don't need that because I've got coverage, and that's fine. But they need to talk to their insurance people and make sure, they're covered.
So this is probably not a question for you, but just out of curiosity, if someone gets, let's say, electrical shock inside your unit, is that tied to the building policy or your personal?
They're probably gonna sue both. They're probably gonna sue the
Go for the
individual owner of
deed
HOA, yeah.
Okay.
And I'll tell you, HOAs, you get sued all the time. Somebody falls in the lobby and then they, people just sue over anything. But what you really, scroll on that, let's talk about that. But what you really want to look for in condos is major lawsuits, like, Palm Beach, for example. They've got some major litigation going on over there right now because of that cracking building. They're suing Brett Robinson because they said the cracking is probably valid. When they were putting the pilings in for Phoenix Gulf Towers or the foundation, the drilling caused a crack in their building. So like that's some litigation you need to be aware of. Your buyer needs to be aware of because this is something that affects the resale of the building. It is something that is probably going to be going on for several years, couple of years. And if they don't win the case, the building's got to be fixed. So it could be an assessment. Or it still could be assessment even if they win because they're gonna have attorney fees, so things like that, litigation, that's why the understanding the litigation that's maybe going on in the HOA, that's one of the reasons why, or the reasons why. So little litigation, like, Mary Sue fell and broke her arm, that's not a big deal, but it's when they're suing contractors and,
That's covered in the minutes, or?
not necessarily, but that's one of the questions they're supposed to answer in that HOA.
Or was it?
Yeah.
Another, was that B.
No, not B. Right here, G.
Oh,
A
okay.
statement of any unsatisfied judgments against association and any pending suit in which the association is a party. So if they're being sued or if they're suing somebody. So,
And that's required for the lister, the seller to disclose.
yes, because it says the seller is to provide all of this information. And it comes through way of the HOA management company or board president or whatever.
So the 5 days seems to be a fixed number there, buyer shall
If
have
you
5
don't
days.
put anything in there, oh, yeah, down here, yeah.
Is that-
I mean, you
That
could
seems that's
override
a
it.
lot of information to review and to vet.
You can do it 5 days. You can do it 5 days. It's 5 business days.
Well, I've noticed it's, most of them are blank and then it says normally it's like blank. Why, is there a particular reason why that's a fixed number?
Don't know.
Okay.
Is there a reason why?
Forms committee thought it was a good idea.
Yeah.
Well, I know, but I mean, business days up there, it's 5 business days is what blank, right? That's a standard when there's contingency term, but this particular one is fixed. I was just
Well,
curious.
here's the thing.
You know,
If a buyer can, if 5 business days, you can review all that information. And what I guess our board didn't want is that we start putting 10, 15, 20 days, and you've got buyers that are just kind of like, oh, I might read this today. I mean, like, this is something that they need to figure out early on, because there's no point tying up a seller's property because you don't want to review.
I get all that, but
Yeah,
if you leave it blank.
that's probably the reason why.
Yeah, I mean, if you use the same terminology going above there, it's fixed, right? It's a fix, I'm curious. Why?
That's probably why. That's probably why. I don't know is the answer.
Okay, that's a good answer.
I
like
just
that.
go with it. And furthermore, if I'm a buyer, I want to, once I give them the information, like, I want them I can have a sense of urgency, so I just have a question.
But in the end, it's up to the buyer to be satisfied with the information that they receive.
Yeah, and that's pretty loose. I mean, they could say, they don't have to give a reason.
Right.
They can just say, I don't like this association, I'm not comfortable with this association, and they can terminate in that 5 business days for receipt.
Or they could get not all the information and say, I'm okay with that.
They could, but I wouldn't advise
Right.
them to not, I would keep pushing to get what they need, because if they don't get all the information, you're representing the buyer, and then something comes up after, guess who they're coming to?
Yeah.
So I assume that information sometimes trickles in and it's not all at once.
No, so-
So,
So they can start reviewing stuff while you're still waiting on
yeah,
it.
but what does that timeline start when you receive A? Did you get 5 days for A?
In my opinion, no, it starts
You get
once
all
you
of
get the final document.
Because it reads in receipt of disclosure.
Like if I get A,
Disclosures, right?
if I get A through E, I'm gonna go ahead and send it to my buyer, but in my opinion, our time has not started ticking because we're still waiting on F through a K.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
That makes sense to me and you, but legally, if there's a dispute, how it's element.
I don't know.
I mean, it says
Well, I mean-
disclosure is plural, so I'm assuming all. but it's not
Buyers shall
clear
have
on that.
5 business days for receipt of disclosures to review and approve. So I guess if they got A through D and they start reviewing it, and then several days later, they get E through K, and then, 5 days have gone by, they go, well, I'm not buying because of B. I guess in theory, they could say, well, sorry, you're passed on that, but you don't have to say why you're not buying. So if you want to get real technical, you probably could.
That's fair. I understand what you're saying. So unless I've gotten them all, I can always say the one I just got, I'm not doing it. But,
So going back to liens and, so just so y'all know, there's a situation at the beach club. Does everybody know what's going on out there?
No,
Do what?
no, but I would like to know.
No. So the beach club had a lot of damage from Hurricane Sally, and, Gates Construction, which was the original developer, they've done all the construction, and, some of their subs have now filed some liens. They did it, there was one filed right before Thanksgiving, and there was a second one filed the day after Thanksgiving. So loans can't be closed out there right now, because the lender is not gonna let a loan close if it cannot get marketable title
That's what just the continuance, bro.
for the condominiums, yeah. All the big lien that I know about is for like 1.2 something. But if you take that amount and you divvy it up amongst all those units, it's not that much per unit. But they have to get the lien released, right? And so my understanding is Yates has, the beach club has not gotten all of their insurance money. They've gotten a portion of it, so they've paid what they can pay up to this point, but they're still fighting with their insurance company. So I personally had 3 loans going out there during this time. One has gone away, so I've got 2. We don't know if it's gonna get cleared quickly or if it's gonna drag on for months, but the association is gonna have to make a decision. Do we, in an effort to try to save the sales in this building, just do an assessment, pay the lien off and pursue our insurance company? Or do we just pursue our insurance company and let the lien sit there until we get the money from the insurance company? So, and I think that's the route they're going. I haven't had an update.
How did you manage, I'm assuming there was a timeline when you offered these, you made the offer for those 2 ones that you have over there. How did you communicate with the other agent or the seller so they could extend the timeline? Because obviously this came up.
So they were already under contract when the liens came about. Yeah, and so like one of them, we were supposed to close on tomorrow. Their rate lock is good until like January the 24th. So we just did an extension yesterday to January 24th, and we're gonna hope and pray that they get cleared up between now and then. If they don't, then we're gonna have to make a decision. Joey Parker, so
How does that work with the inspection period and all that? Are they, if you can't close on, after you did that extension, what happens? Do they get their money back?
yeah, oh yeah. Because see, in the contract, it says the seller has to provide marketable title. And you can't provide marketable title if there's a lien. Now, if somebody's paying cash, you can close. There'll be an exception to the title, and to the title insurance. And then my understanding, but verify this with the title person, my understanding is once the lien's cleared, that that's just gonna drop off their exception will go away. Does that make sense? But the lender is not going to, they're just not going to let it close until there's a clean title. We've talked to, Joey Parker talked to his bank, like not the local head, like head of Center State Bank, and is asking them that if the seller will agree to escrow some money, like if you take that $1.2 million and you not divvy it out, like it's not a bunch of, the seller's willing to escrow that amount until the lien is cleared, if they'll let them go ahead and close the loan with the exception to title. He's not confident they're gonna let him, but he's trying, so.
Is there anything going on with the cottages over there?
Not that I'm aware of. Those are all individually owned. Yeah. I mean, I guess they're part of the master association, but this lien, I mean, I saw the lien, it specifically names the 4 buildings. They're called parcel 4, parcel 3, I don't know anyway, but it names the 4 buildings. I didn't see any naming of the.
How did you get this kind of information? Access to the.
Well, liens are filed, it's public records.
Yeah.
But I had 3 loans going
Oh,
on. I
yeah.
had 3 contracts going on there, yeah, yeah. So,
So it has to pop up.
yeah, the title company sent an email and said, hey, just FYI, this just showed up. Yeah.
I know of 2, we have 2 going right now, Broadmoor, and, which is Orange Beach, and.
They have
Phoenix.
liens.
They have,
Do they-
they have a lawsuit. Broadmoor and Phoenix 3.
Who is Broadmoor suing, or who's suing them? They've had a financial situation over there for a number of years.
Yeah, they own, like, right now, they only have $70,000 in reserves.
And I think they've got a really big loan. Do they still have that that's from Ivan?
Ooh, yeah, they didn't see that, but, their
Used to.
assessment was 20,000, and it has to be paid over 2022. But they have not been paid back from the insurance yet. And then Phoenix
Summer House,
3.
same thing. So listen, that's what's going on. Summer House, if you look, there's a lot of units for sale there. They
Is
changed
that gonna require a cash buyer for Summer House, do you think?
what Joey could do is portfolio loan, or Brian Lynch at Movement.
What about Bar?
Bar's one of the ones that I send to people. They're not gonna have as much flexibility in products, I don't think, but they're good with condos, and they're good to say upfront if they don't think they can do it. I'm trying to think, Summer House, so what's going on at Summer House? I think you can still close it, because here's the deal at Summer House. They changed insurance companies, I mean, within like a couple months of Hurricane Sally to save some money. Storm hit, my understanding is they've been paid about $100,000, that's it. They had some repairs that had to be made, so they took out an SBA loan. And my understanding is that SBA loan is gonna be called in February. They're still fighting with their insurance company. It's not looking super positive that they're gonna get anything the last I checked. So what that means for the homeowners is they're going to be assessed for that. Additionally, there's still some damages that they've deferred that they didn't, that are gonna have to be, so there's still some things that have to be repaired too. So they've got this SBA loan that they may or may not get the funds from the insurance company to pay, plus they've got some more repairs that need to be made. So Summer House is a great building and they're gonna be fine. It's just things that you need to know if
They're
you've
being
got a buyer.
assessed
that's-
$1,200 per unit per month.
Right,
interest.
right now, yeah. Is that right? 1,200?
So that's just interest.
Huh?
That's just interest.
Yeah, that's just the interest that you have a loan, yeah. Because I've got one that's pending right now.
Yeah.
Was closed by the end of the month.
Okay. Do they know about the loan? The SBA loan?
I didn't know about it.
Check into it. Check into it. I had one under contract and that's how I found out. And my information may not be 100% accurate, so check.
And so the selling agent was using Movement lenders, so I don't know if that.
You can get a loan there. I mean, the SBA, I mean, the HOA is not suing anybody. They're not being sued. It's just, there's a potential there to be a rather large assessment if they don't get some money from insurance.
Yeah, rumors were there was $20,000 per unit assessment coming. That's,
Probably, yeah.
So the assessment happens really often.
No, not necessarily. Like Kareem, let's talk about Kareem. Kareem's built 02, 03. In that number of time, they've had 2 assessments. They had a $1,000 assessment after Sally, and they upgraded their internet about 4 years ago, 3 years ago. They updated all their internet lines, and there was no assessment for that. It just depends. Depends on the building. Well, I always tell buyers, look, you buy a condo, it's not a matter of if, it's when. You own one long enough, you are going to get an assessment of some sort. And you don't have to say, look, you have to replace the roof on your house. It's just, it's maintenance. It's a building and it has to have maintenance. It's just with a condo, you've got a little less say on when that maintenance happens, you know, or whatever. But it's, some people may own a condo and never get an assessment, but
It's like owning a house, when you gotta replace the roof, you know, you gotta either be planning for it, or you're gonna have one lump
you're gonna have
sum
one
at
big,
some point.
The HOAs, and then one of the things you can put on your list of suggested questions, and I'm not gonna get into details because I don't know ins and outs, but they can do what's called a reserve study. And that's the third party company, they have come in that looks and tells them basically how much money they need to have a reserve, so that if they had a detrimental event, everybody's made whole. Most of them don't do them, I don't think, or they do them, a lot of them don't have, they don't have what they're supposed to, but you can read up on reserve studies if you wanted to. Any other questions? Or can I move on? What is it? What?
Nothing. Okay, go ahead. You
Okay.
did good.
Hey, Heather.
Yeah.
When do you think the best time of year to buy a condo is if you're an investor?
Well, I mean, your best rental season is March to August. That's when they'll make the bulk of their money. So right now, the first of the year. Yeah.
A lot of people are trying to do a 1031 before the end of the year.
Yeah.
They know the consequences next year. Will be terrible.
Yeah, I think we're going to see capital gains double. That's official, do you know? Our president, our capital gains are 20%. The president is trying to get that moved to 40% and also is trying to do away with 1031.
That'd be 20% each year, most likely, because right now it's 10% a year.
No, your capital gains, if you sell an investment property,
Within 1 year, it's 20, right? If you do it in the second year, it's 10,
no, it's 20% capital gains.
regardless.
I mean, I'm not an accountant, check with the accountant, but my understanding is 20% period. And the president wants it to be 40%. Yeah.
If it's sold in the same year that you bought, then it's just added as ordinary income.
Yeah.
So if you're in a super high tax rate, you'll get taxed.
1031, let's talk about 1031s. Does everybody know what 1031s are? Yeah? I mean, we need to talk about them. Does anybody not know?
Never done them.
Never done them. Do you know what it is?
Yes.
Okay. And there's really not much to know, just that if the buyer was going to be doing the 1031, your buyer's going to be doing 1031, or your seller, sometimes sellers don't know. I mean, I've had a couple times where I've mentioned it to a seller and they're like, what? And I'm like, go talk to your accountant. And they ended up doing a 1031. They didn't know. So it's good to have that conversation if you've got a seller that is selling an investment property. But the main thing to know is that, the buyer has an intermediary, you need their information. When you put an offer together, it needs to say something in the offer that the buyer intends to purchase the property with 1031 funds, and that the seller agrees to cooperate at no additional expense to the seller.
What about reverse then?
Huh?
What's your knowledge about reverse 1031s?
Very little. I know it's there, and I know that you can go ahead and purchase the property and come back and use that 1031. Because I'm not involved in those, and I've never personally done one.
Basically, what you're doing is you're putting an exchange and then you're renting from the exchange until your primary property sells. Is that correct?
I don't know. I really have never been a part of one.
That's an accounting question.
Yeah,
And so a lot of people just need to understand, a 1031 exchange does not get rid of the tax. You're going to eventually
you're
pay tax
kicking it down the road.
regardless.
Yeah, it's not, your tax doesn't go away. You're just kicking it down the road. Eventually, somebody's will have to pay it.
And it's not for everyone.
Yeah. I just did 1031 and I almost didn't do it, but I decided to go ahead and do it when I counted, look at the numbers.
Because it only costs you about $1,200 to set it up, right?
Yeah, I think it was 1,000. So the important thing to note, if you have a seller and they're gonna do 1031, they cannot touch the money. They touch it, it's done. They need to have, before they close on that property, they need to have an intermediary set up so that the title company can acquire that money to the intermediary after the closing. All right, HO6, property taxes. Do y'all understand property taxes, kind of how they work, if it's investment, non-investment? Any questions on that? It's basically double if it's an investment. I'm going to go back to financing. Sorry, I'm skipping around. I'm going to go back to financing for a second. So the one thing to note on the down payment. So on a condo, if you're buying it as a second home, the minimum down payment is going to be 10%. And it will go up from there. If it's a Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac back loan, it may require 25%, depending on if that association, if that lender does a limited review or a full review. If they do a full review, they can put as little as 10% down. If they have to do a limited review, it's 25% down. So know that. So when I'm working with a buyer, that's one of the first things I ask is like, okay, are you financing? What are you planning to put down? What percentage do you want to put down? Well, I really only can do 10%. Okay, great. So here's the deal. You've got to talk to this lender. Like, here's these resort specialist lenders. You've got to get pre-approved. And what we've got to do is before I take you out to see properties, we've got to make sure that what we're showing you is going to qualify for that 10% down. Because the last thing I want to do is take you to see a property, you fall in love with it, and you find out that you got to put 25% down and you can't. So that's the conversation I have. So that's super important to have up front because you don't want to show them properties they can't buy. And so what that looks like is, I'll, whenever they get ready to start looking at property, I'll go, okay, these 6 buildings fit your criteria. And then I'll get with the lender and go, okay, I'm going to show Mr. and Mrs. Smith these 6 properties, which of these are going to qualify for 10% down. And the lender may have not done a loan in that building that year, but he or she can usually give you an idea if they do a lot of condos, like, hey, that one historically is fine, this one's fine, that one's definitely not, whatever. So you don't waste your time, their time, and they don't fall over the property that they can't buy. Now, they say, well, I'm gonna do 10% down, but, I can put more down. Well, okay, great, could you put 25% down if the building requires it? Sure.
Is that because of the owner ratio to rental units?
So that's one of the questions on the limited reviews. Okay, so it depends on the limited reviews. This is Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac specifically, okay? The portfolio loan, they don't even do the review. It doesn't matter. Joey's portfolio, you put as low as 10% down, period. So on the full review, they're asking what percentage of the homeowners own in there. They're asking how much do they put in a reserve account. So the Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac wants to see that the HOA is putting 10% of their income into a reserve account. If they're putting 9.9%, that means they have to go limited review and it's going to require 25% down. So limited review form is going to require 25% down. If they can do full review, you can put as little as 10% down, being a second home. And most people buy it as a second home, even if they're buying it to invest, to be as a rental, because more times than not, people buying down here, they're not true, what I would call true investors. They're, hey, we'd love to come to the beach here. We want to buy a place, we can afford it, and we want to rent it to offset the cost. But they tend to use it probably those 2 weeks out of the year. So
That's a part, 14 days. You can use up to 14 days, then you can have said maintenance days. You could get more than that.
that's right.
But the minimum is only 1 day. For now, you only have to occupy your second home 1 day.
For tax purposes.
For tax
For tax purposes, this is, I'm not talking lender version,
Right.
yeah. I think the lender wants to know that you're going to use those keys out of you. They also don't want to know you're going to rent it if you're buying a second home.
On the lending side, so what would keep somebody, why would every single person here use the portfolio loan? What keeps you?
It's a little bit higher rate. I mean, this portfolio until about 6 months ago, 7 months ago, a portfolio loan generally looks like a 5, 7, or 10-year arm. You know what that is? Okay. So now it's fixed rate, which is super cool.
Right.
It is going to be a little bit higher rate, but it's still
It comes out.
3.6%. Great rate.
I was just wondering why would.
Yeah.
I just got off the phone with Helga, and my person for the Phoenix 3 is having to switch to portfolio, and she
Does
was
she have a
at,
portfolio?
yes.
Oh, I didn't know she had a portfolio. That's good to know.
So I just got off the phone with her. I didn't know either. So, she said she was at, 3.2 and the portfolio is going to be 4.2 or right at.
So hers is a bit higher. I think Joey's is floating between 3.5 and 3.8. But Helga's, so I have 4 lenders that I send people to. Center State, Bar Group, Movement Mortgage, Brown Lynch, whatever companies.
Yeah.
And Kathy Lundy. She is with
And Joey Park.
I said some.
Kathy who?
Kathy Lundy, she's with, I can give you her number. How about that?
There you go.
Now, who is Helga with?
Bar Group.
She owns Car.
So her email is Kathy.Lundy, Lundy, @my ccmortgage.com. It's like country something. Her number is 251-422. Sorry, I stopped showing. 0939.
0939.
So on the financing side of things, that's good to know. So if they're, buying this a second home, just know that they've got to be prepared to have at least 10% put down. No FHA, on each condos. People probably don't want to go VA loan. Let's see. Taxes, rentals. So one of the things that you do need to make yourself aware of, and those condo documents and rules and bylaws will be part of that. We talked about the pet restriction, but you also need to know they have rental restrictions, because there's some buildings down here. There's not many of them on the Alabama side that have rental restrictions, but there are some rental restrictions. A lot of them do put in their condo docs 3-day minimum, because Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac wants to see that. But if they're planning on renting it, you need to make sure it's not a rental restricted building.
So on that, I called on a home, it was a house actually, not a condo, and the sales agent was saying that there's an area down here, I don't know Orange Beach very too well, but he said there's an area that's restricted.
So the city, both city, Gulf Shores and Orange Beach, they have restrictions for single family homes. This does not apply to condos. The condo rental restrictions come at the association level.
Okay.
Yeah, basically in Orange Beach, if the single family home is not on the beach or across the street from the beach, it's 2-week minimum on rentals, basically. And then, but there are like Windward Lakes in Orange Beach, which is across the street from the beach. That association restricts rentals. So you
I
pay
thought a 2-week minimum or 2-week maximum.
minimum. So the city of Orange Beach put an ordinance in place about, I don't know, 3 years ago, I lose track of time. And they said if it's a single family home and it's not on the beach or across the street, and they've got a, you know, they have a map that shows you that, like Bear Point.
Meaning they had to stay in the house more than.
You can rent it to somebody, but it has to be at least 2 weeks.
Okay.
Same thing for Ono Island?
Well, Ono restricted theirs about probably 8 years ago. Theirs is is it a month? Yeah, yeah.
No, it's 6 months.
I thought it was 6 months, yeah.
And there's only,
There's a few rentals left. So
There's
there was
7
about
or 8.
14 when they put this in
Yeah.
place. There was about 14 that were grandfathered in, but as those homes sold, that went away. And the same thing, like you'll find rentals down in Bear Point, same thing. There were some people that were grandfathered in. My understanding is when the property sells, that goes away.
So this one was on the water, it wasn't on the beach, so.
What
you're saying
one
it-
was it on?
But it's, so if it's on the, on the beach, they're okay?
It was on the beach.
Okay.
Unless it's in a community or something that restricts, I don't know of any single family home. Actually, there is one. Catherine McKinnis had one listed on the very west side of Orange Beach. That when that little, there's like a few little homes right there, when that was developed, they put covenants in place that said no short-term rentals, and they still are there. Yeah. And then in in Gulf Shores, it's basically for single family homes. If you're within, is that Second Street or 2 to 3 blocks of the beach, basically. Like basically everything on West Beach can be rented, and then on East Beach, those 2 blocks that are north of the beach, they can be vacation rentals. But like Windmill Ridge Road, which is crazy to me, you cannot vacation rent on that road. Which road? Windmill Ridge. That's supposed to be from the city.
That's what it floods all the time, right?
It does go to water a lot, yeah.
So since you're talking about rentals, what are the rules in Gulf Shores about Airbnbs? How many times you can do that? Is there any restrictions on Gulf Shores versus VRBO, Airbnb, or any of that? Does it matter who you use? I thought there was I heard something about a limit at one time, but how many times you can use Airbnb?
I don't think that, they talked about it, but.
I mean, here's the thing, there's,
I think you just gotta have a license.
you do have to have a business license, so that's something to tell your buyers. The city's gonna require you to have a business license to rent it, and it's, I don't know, $150 to $200 a year.
Fairhope requires the same thing.
Yeah, I don't know.
And they're
I'm sure
taken
they all
pretty serious
do.
about it.
Yeah, I'm sure they all do. Yeah, that's where my stomach is growling. If y'all hear it, I apologize. All right, limitations, anything, so here's what I want to say about limitation. Anything that is an important fact for your buyer. This is real estate across the board. It needs to be clear. So if there's something specific they're wanting to do with that condo, you need to confirm it, that they can do that. So the rentals, the pets, those are the two big things. I can't think of anything else. Rentals and pets.
Is it pretty standard that the declarations have the same flow for each building, or is it, you know, if you look?
So,
Because there, I mean, that's a pretty difficult document to read, and one just, you know, look at description, you can't word search and all that stuff, so. So I was just wondering if there was a standard template that they.
no, but I mean, a lot of them, like some of them include as bills, some don't.
Right.
You know, they have the same need, but I don't think they all run the same.
I was gonna ask, I know a lot of the condos come with a boat slip or two. Can you sell your boat slip?
Depends on the condo docs. But if it's in a condo, you could sell it to another homeowner. If it's assigned or needed, a lot of times you can, but that depends on everything. But not to just usually not to just John Doe off the street, you know. Oh, and there are some little slips that you can buy on Orange Beach that are in a all right, let's talk about rentals. So you've got rentals, a lot of rentals down here, and actual versus projected. So I like to get both, whether I'm representing buyer or seller. I always get rental protection on my listings, and then for buyer, you know, if we get the rental history and we see, well, you know, the owner used it 3 weeks in the summer, and you know, it's always good to get a projection as well. I do feel like sometimes the projections are a little bit, you know, I think it costs us something more. But I will say this, our rentals in this area are up about 20%. So rentals are really good this year. The Meyer puts a rental report out, and it's been a great tool over the years, but now that they're becoming Picasso, that's probably going away, and their rental numbers are not that great. So, you know, I always tell people, here it is, it's a good jumping off tool just to give you an idea of what the potential is and what it could exceed.
That's something you can download it, you have to do that.
No, they can
Publish
put
it,
out, yeah.
yeah.
Jen's got them.
Yeah, I'll start that. And it was only for 2,000.
Did you used to work for mine?
I've got 18, 19.
But I think it's probably gonna go away. You know, there's Picasso.
Casa. Casa owns, now will represent 18 to 19% of all rentals along Orange Beach and Gulf Shores.
I'm surprised it's not more than that.
But they are more aggressive.
They're buying up
They do
companies left
generate
and
more
right.
money, but I think that Myers report is probably off 25%.
Yeah, they're not.
It's low,
Their
super low.
numbers are not great. I'll tell you, from a rental standpoint, I like the smaller to medium-sized companies. Generally speaking, over the years, when I've looked at their numbers versus like what used to be Kaiser was a big one, and then Meyer, which Kaiser started another management company, but I don't know what it's called. Meyer, Young Suncoast was kind of a big player at one point, but the smaller to medium companies tend to, in my opinion, outperform what some of the big ones are doing. And I don't know if it's just because they have less units.
What's your top 5 smaller units?
Well, I tell you, I've just recently been super impressed with Elizabeth Moss, her and her husband, Elizabeth Murray Moss. That's Alabama Getaways or Alabama Beach Getaways. Their offices here in Ward. They've been putting up some really good numbers. Pam Martin, if you're doing Beach Club, Pam Martin does a phenomenal job. Melissa Ross does a good job with hers. I mean, those are both in our company.
What's the standard?
And then Polly Run, I mean, I haven't seen their numbers, but they're getting some traction with their rentals. Polly Run. I said, oh, what was
What's
it?
the rate charge typically?
20% is the average. I've got a Creve under contract right now, and he told me that Creve Realties said 25%.
Spectrum was even higher than that, it's 28%.
Now, when you say bigger, are you talking about like Brett Robinson bigger?
Brett Robinson, yeah, that big, but that's, I would not use Brett Robinson if it's not a Phoenix property, because they're not gonna do a great job. So, as a matter of fact, I don't even know if they take any on that are not Brett Robinson or Phoenix properties anymore, but,
I will recommend
Meyer was big.
luxury golf rentals. As a good friend of mine.
Over here, I haven't seen his
He
own.
does a really good job.
Does he?
He used to run.
Now, his plan is a little different. So the guy he's talking about, what he does is almost like a net. So he guarantees the property owner, like he says, I guarantee you're gonna get 45,000 a year. And then if he does 60 out of it, he's just made 15,000. Like he's not gonna pay property owner more. He's paid them that amount, and then anything over and above that, they
The
can.
council will
Yes,
do
that's
a
what-
revenue guarantee.
That's
Do they?
interesting.
Yeah, he's one of the more knowledgeable.
They somehow get away with it. I don't know. It's kind of borderline. I don't know.
I'd say he's one of the more knowledgeable people. that I think I've had in the space.
Yeah. What's his name?
I'm shocked to see.
You just say something.
What's his name? Les.
Well, then they're losers. A rental management company's a loser.
And
Um,
you talk about, the rental management company, how they get involved in the transaction. For, let's say, a buyer that wants to buy it to live in it, or to, as a second home, and someone rents.
So let's go to that section of the contract. And they actually, I think, just made a change to that. You see that they updated our contract last month. And that was one of the sections that got updated, and it was a needed update. 16. If this property is subject to any lease, management agrees or license agreements. This offer will be contingent on buyer's acceptance thereof. Seller has blank days, business days, following acceptance date of this agreement to provide copies to buyer. Buyer shall have 5 business days for receipt of documents to notify seller in writing if not acceptable, or this contingency being removed. And then it goes on to say, all security deposit, lease agreements, rental agreements, blah, blah, blah. Transfer buyer closing. So this is the buyer's out. So if they go under contract on a property and the seller, the listing side of this agreement has to provide, and I will tell you, listing agents have no idea what's in their contract. So you're gonna have to chase it down, more than likely. But if the buyer gets the future bookings from the seller side and they go, well, I don't wanna honor these, that's their out. They don't have to honor it, they have to notify them in writing. Now, some of the management companies are going to where the seller of the property, if those bookings that they procured are canceled due to the sale, the seller is gonna have to pay them a fee for that booking. So just be aware of that. And that's in their contract. And a lot of times they don't know what they signed. So, if you have a buyer that is, not going to want to honor bookings, it's almost better to put that in the contract, as part of the negotiations. It can give them a little bit of a disadvantage with the seller, but, just kind of look at the situation inside. But if I know for a fact that they are not going to rent this property, a lot of times I'll put it in the contract and be very clear on that up front. They will not honor anything. But they just changed this section, and it is so much better than what it was. It was just like, hey, they're supposed to provide future lease agreements, that was kind of it. Does that answer your question?
Oh, yeah, it does.
Okay, cool. And sometimes people don't want to stay with the management company, and that can be a little bit, if you've got somebody that's closing around May, June, that can be a little bit hairy because those are peak rental months, and if a management company's got people's vacations, so that can get a little bit tricky, but, on the rentals, So average commission for the rental management companies, 20%. There are some that do more, there are some that do less. There's some that are 18%. So,
If a council did come out and say that it was, they have a sliding scale. So if that property generates, say, $100,000, they're only going to charge 18%. Anything that's down to 25%, they're going to charge about 22 or 23%. And it takes the same amount of management as does
it's the
big
manpower.
property versus one.
Any other questions on the rentals?
So think about this. So if you've got a property that's going to sell, in October, that's one thing. But your property's maybe going to sell in May, and then they look like to me it would be more beneficial to keep the management because your chances of selling or the new buyer to get the property for them to market it, and they're going to have this be very limited income coming during the peak season.
So that's what I tell my clients, like, if you're closing and they've got a big book of business, like, just sign a contract with them, you have it out, make sure you know what you're signing and get through
Right.
that busy season, then if you wanna make a change then. But, you
Yeah,
know,
they can stop
and
the
they're-
rentals and then, stop on no future rentals.
Yeah,
So
exactly, they can
make
say,
your
hey,
money
we'll
and
honor
then-
the bookings through
Yeah.
July,
Right.
and then don't book anything after that.
Yeah.
And they'll sign, the buyer would sign a short-term lease agreement with that management company.
That's sometimes a plus for them to be like, oh, I got all this income. for a little
Yeah.
while, so I'll just make changes.
But 100% of those proceeds would go to that new buyer. The
Yeah.
seller's not gonna say, hey, I'm gonna get a little bit.
So
That's
the
happening.
contract says that rentals are prorated at closing. So if you close on a Wednesday and there's a week-long rental in there, the first half of the week goes to the seller, and the last half of the week, and the management company will do that proration.
Okay, so I've got a deal that's supposed to close on December 30th. There's a renter in there now, and the contract states it's good through the 31st. But in the contract, it should, I can't remember what it is now, they take possession upon
At the day
the
closing,
day of closing.
but they put in there that they would honor that rental,
Well, yeah,
then they
there
can't.
should be a question about it.
They can possess it out the 31st after 10 o'clock.
Right.
From a wrap-up.
Just a quick question. So on the, when you start talking about, you're talking about the rental history projections and all that. I have a client, he wants the P and L, like, for example, we've seen that the owners in their 100 days, they're still doing like 56K in revenue, but that's
They
just
want a
revenue.
detail.
Yes, and so is that easy to get? Is it you fight?
Is it a property that sellers manage themselves?
What's a Korean property? So I don't know yet. I'm just still.
Okay, so let's talk, I'm gonna touch on a couple things on that. So 2 things to know. When you get the rental history from a management company, it should only be the rent. It should not include the lodging tax or the cleaning fee number, okay? When you get the rental history on a property that is being self-managed, and you get those numbers, you about it's probably got the lodging taxes and cleaning fees in group with it. Because the sellers don't know, or the listing agent doesn't advise them, like, we need to see the rent amount only. Because that's pass-through money, that was never income to the seller. That was the local government official money, and then, the state. And then, the cleaning fee.
Well, that's what I was curious, because regardless of the revenue, it's like if you don't include HOA fees or,
Yeah.
we just want to know what's the profit that the seller's actually making.
So they could show you their property taxes, that page from the property taxes. Most of them are not very organized, and they're not gonna have a P&L.
That's
They're
what
not gonna have, but if you can get that, that's awesome.
Right, so I'll ask, but if not,
It's, you could put an offer in and put something that says they have to verify that rental income and what, I don't know how you word it, but that if it's true rental income or if it's rental income plus lodging tax plus cleaning fees. what was the net or the gross rent?
Those are the actual projections come from the appraisal, right? The projections for that would come from the appraisal, correct? It's not a form of the appraisal that they do.
So if the borrower is doing an investment loan, the appraiser will get projections, but they usually go to, like, I've had them call me and ask for projections. They don't write the projections. They're not in the rental side of things. But I mean, any of the costing and projections, who else do we get projections from? But the projections come from management, usually.
I just want to make sure I was asking, like, I didn't know if that came from the other agent, the agent would go to the seller and say, hey, can you give me a no, or?
I would, yes, you can ask the listing agent to ask the seller for that, and I would ask the listing agent, hey, who's managing the property?
Right.
And is this just the gross rent before commissions were taken out? Because if they're using a management company, they're gonna give you the gross rent. So it might be 50,000 that unit did, but if it's 20% commissions, it's
Right.
40,000 net. to
Yeah, I
the-
mean,
to the owner.
they could still be losing money. you don't know.
Yeah. But I would, ask them, who's managing, is it self-managed, and then ask the question of, okay, is this gross rent, or is this gross rent plus lodging tax and planning fee? Or is it net rent? I got one the other day that it was net rent, like, it showed me what the owner of the property, what they pocket, what they took home.
Right, and that's what we're really trying to have.
Yeah.
Cool, thank you.
So
Worst
we can show
case.
you can show you, that'd be a what, K9?
I don't know how to count it. I don't know.
Okay. Didn't know until I asked,
I don't
right?
know, Chuck.
Okay. K9 would show how much income from that property. from your tax.
I don't know. Anybody in the accountant here?
I'm not.
She
an accountant.
just sells real estate exceptionally well.
So the worst case pitfalls, top 2 or 3 pitfalls that you just gotta like, wow, what's the worst that could happen in investing and or in rental condo business besides catastrophic, building?
I mean, I think not understanding what's going on with that association and the purchase of the property get a big surprise after right after closing. I guess I've done this so long, I don't even know what the pitfalls are.
I mean, not everything's gonna make money, but most of them shouldn't lose too much money.
No, so this is the conversation I have with buyers. Like, if you are looking to, now it's a little bit different, because the rates are up, but also our prices are up. The rental rates are up, but, if you are looking at this and you think that you're gonna buy this property and you're gonna finance it and you're gonna have a full service management company and as a condo with the HOA, if you think you're gonna walk away with a big profit every year, this is probably not the property for you. But if you are cool with breaking even or maybe even taking a slight loss, then let's keep moving forward. But it may cash flow, but it's when people want to finance it to the gill, they don't want to touch anything on it. They want somebody to handle everything. So they've got the commission. It can be tough to cash flow.
It's pricey.
Yeah, it can be tough to cash flow. But some people, and again, I'd say account it, but I plant the seed with them. Some people need that loss for tax purposes. So it's
But as
okay
a
because
rule-
what they're looking at, with the way you look at it, like when I run the numbers, a lot of times it might be a $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 year-over-year loss. But did they get to vacation down here 2-3 weeks out of the year? And did they pay somebody else's mortgage, or did they, use their own property and let somebody else pay their mortgage and just have it out of pocket and the tax benefit up from the loss? Does that make sense? That's
And the
what I- that's what-
appreciation department. Appreciation.
Well, and that's what I tell people, where you make your money in our market is the equity you're building over time. We don't know what's gonna happen in our market. I mean, 07, 08 was awful. But look where we are now. So for a true real estate investor, it's a long game. If you can play the long game, you're fine. Because real estate's gonna always, can't say always, but it's gonna come back. If we have a downturn, it's still gonna come back. People go, this is the other thing I'm hearing right now. I think we're at a bubble. We're at the top of the market. Well, we might be, but guess what? When the market shifts, it's because, gonna be because the interest rates have gone up If you buy it right now and you're at a 3.25 versus you buy it when the prices go down, but you're at 4 or 5%, your mortgage payment's gonna be less right now, and if you can ride it out, you're fine. That's the way I look at it. I get very.
So so to list the condos, all the same documents that we use to list the residential home. The listing agreement is the same thing.
Yeah.
Disclosures and all that. Same purchase agreement. Okay.
Yeah, right now, if you're able to invest, there's tax benefits for you know, the interest on the mortgage, the depreciation on the building, the, you know, the improvements, the adjusted basis on the property that you can, you know, dish out. There's so much.
There's something I'm just gonna tell y'all this term, and then you can go talk to your about it. It's called cost segregation study. It's usually done on commercial property, and they can go, you have to pay to have this study done. And I don't know if it makes sense for just the average condo down here, but if somebody has like a really high-end property, it might. The study looks and it segregates every cost on that property, and they can, the first year, they have that cost segregation take a big year of depreciation on it. That's all I can tell you for it. Look into it. If you guys want to.
Operating expenses. Like that on operating.
Appliances are new.
Yeah.
Before we lose time, on inspections, I don't know how much time we have, but I did want to cover, or condo inspections, or, you know, home inspections, or condo inspections, do they do the unit, or do they look into the building itself?
They just do the unit, so here's I mean, I'm glad you touched on that. Here's the thing on condo inspections, there's not a lot to inspect. But I always tell my buyers, look, we're caveat indoor, you need to do it. What you need to look out for is age of HVAC, age of hot water heater. Then they're gonna check the electrical, you know, the mechanics, and then I'll tell them about water spots. You go into no condos, you're gonna see plenty of water spots. And I'll talk to them about that, because I've learned over the years the things that people see in inspections and they just flip out when it's really not a big deal. So I try to set that expectation up front. Like, this is what you're gonna see. There's gonna be a water spot. They're gonna put a moisture meter to it, and they're gonna tell you if it's active or if it's not. If it's not active, we might could ask them to fix the spot, or if it is active, you know, they gotta fix it. But the HVAC is, I always tell people, it's like one of your more expensive maintenance items in condo, 10 to 14 years. That's about it. So, if they're on a annual service contract, usually they'll go, you know, to that.
So an individual unit has its own.
Oh, yeah. Now Phoenix West 2, they have a geothermal system. So like the main outside piece is the HOA, but the inside air handler is the owner. And like the HOA fee over at Phoenix West and Phoenix West 2 includes electricity for the HVAC owner, because it's one, I don't understand geothermal, but it's one outside piece. And that, so that everybody's electric is included in that HOA. But yeah, you own them, and a lot of times the outside unit's on the roof, and then you've got the inside air. Salt air is hard on that equipment.
Is there a term height on?
If that's purely at the association level. If the association feels like it's needed, that's their responsibility. I don't know of anybody that's gotten that termite bond on their individual unit. Now, if it's an older wood frame, tiling, building, if the association doesn't have a termite bond, if I was the owner, I would look at, like, could I get a termite bond? What's that gonna cover? But most of them, the associations have here.
And is there any beach lights fee for condos?
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
No, like Beach Club, the homeowners out there pay a beach mouse fee every year. But that's the only one I know of that has a separate beach mouse fee. Beach mouse. I don't know that they exist.